Welcome back to another episode of the Adventures of a Disney Dad podcast. Matt and Chip are here. We are fresh off of the flu, getting better. Like I'm like 90%. Chip, it seems like you're about
I'm good.
90%.
Yeah, I'm good. I might be better than 90, but the household isn't, but I'm good.
If the boys sound a little stuffy, we apologize, but we're ready to roll. And we're going to talk. Spring break is right around the corner. And Chip and I talk a lot about Disney with crowds, but we're going to do our annual Surviving Spring Break at Walt Disney World episode. We're going to talk through some of our tips and tricks and advice for navigating Disney, at spring break, but also like it really applies to any period of time where there's really heavy crowds. If you're talking between Christmas and New Year's, all of this is stuff that you can apply to other times of the year. And honestly, you can really take it to some of the times that it's not so crowded. So, Chip, like, let's jump right into it. Spring break, we talk a lot about setting expectations. So, I think for me, that would be like the number one tip is to set realistic expectations, which means lowering your expectations when you're dealing with major crowds in terms of what can I get done, what reservations can I make, things like that. So I think that that one is like the given for anybody that's listening to the show. That's the number one is to lower your expectations on what you're going to get accomplished. Moving on, what would be your number one tip or advice to give to people that are heading to Walt Disney World with crowds?
I think the biggest thing I would say is probably character dining.
Thing.
And it's just a way to, number one, it's going to take you an hour and a half out of the park or in the park per se, but it's also going to give you that time to interact with characters versus going and waiting in line for 2 hours to meet the same character where you can meet potentially four characters while eating dinner or eating breakfast or lunch. And I think it's just a good steal of time. You're going to get a good meal because the majority of character meals are pretty good. There's a few that we would not recommend, but there's some we do recommend. And I think that's just one of the best bang for your bucks in terms of setting your expectations of, hey, at least we're going to see these characters. We're going to have some interaction time. The kids will get to do it. And it takes you away from the crowd.
And in terms of like what you can accomplish, if you think about like, say your child is like really into princesses and you want to meet as many princesses as possible, going individually at Epcot to each princess character meet could take a long time. But you swap that out with one meal at Akershus and it's a game changer.
Yeah,
So, to Chip's point, like if you're thinking strategically, how much time would you, spend waiting in line to meet Winnie the Pooh and friends versus getting a meal at Crystal Palace and getting to meet them at the same time? So I think, to Chip's point, and that, that really goes across the board. It's a Cinderella's Royal Table. Would you rather eat, inside the castle and meet Cinderella there or wait 45 minutes at, Princess Fairy Tale Hall? You've got options there. And I think that that's a really good piece of advice. I like that one, Chip. I think for me, it would be this is not my number one tip. This is not the time to skimp out on Multipass.
yeah,
This
there
is
you
the
go.
time to buy it. And, we've talked on shows recently about how the more expensive Multipass or Lightning Lanes are, the more you need them. And so I think that really rings true at spring break. Like you're not going to get as much done with multipass as you would a different time of the year because there's going to be more people that buy it. It's going to be more expensive. Demand is going to be high, but like buy it and save yourself 3 to 5 hours waiting in lines. And you will thank yourself later. It is money well spent every time.
I agree. That's a great take, especially with crowds and all of that. You don't want to be, especially with kids, you don't want to be waiting in line. The weather might be, it could be really hot. It could be perfect weather. So it's one of those things that I agree 100% with that.
One of the things that I hear people say a lot, Chip, is like, well, what if I'm in a rope drop? And multipass doesn't have to replace a good rope drop strategy. In fact, in terms of getting stuff done, they work best together, right?
Yes.
So like if you are going to Epcot with multipass, for example, and you select Frozen as your first ride, if you rope drop Remy's, you're going to dominate Epcot that day, even on spring break. So it doesn't have to be an either or thing. Like you can do both together. And I think that in fact, a lot of the times that's the best way to do it. I don't rope drop. I mean, obviously I have experience doing it, but like when I'm with my kids, that's not something we like to do. Chip does. So it's how you build your strategy that's best for your family, I think is really important there. Chip, what would be your next tip?
My next tip was kind of leaning towards the rope drop, and we'll go with the rope drop. I think it is rope drop in terms of if you have that must do ride. Like you say you haven't been to Disney World in a little bit, and you want to ride Tron, or you want to ride anything, Toy Story Mania, Slinky Dog, whatever it is. Go do that first and foremost. Be early, plan on it. Listen, people always say rope drop. You're still waiting, but
That's my
now you're
biggest
not,
pet peeve.
and it might only be an hour versus an hour and a half, but you can do that and maybe get another ride in that's a lower tier ride, and you've gotten things done really before the park opens to the general public.
What people don't understand, Chip, and it's a really good point you're making. Rope drop isn't about the amount of time you save on your first ride. It's the second, third, and fourth that you
Yes.
can get on immediately thereafter that are the really big savings. So if you go in and you rope drop Seven Dwarfs Mine Train, it's the ability to go straight over to Pirates and Jungle Cruise and knock those out right away with very low lines that you really get the benefit. Because otherwise, yeah, to your point, like if you're waiting at the front gate for an hour just to go straight to Seven Doors Mine Train, you've still waited an hour. And people forget about that all the time. It's like you're just waiting in line in a different place. But the real benefit of rope dropping is what you get done, in the next few rides thereafter, once you knock out that, big primetime ride or whatever. So, that's a really great point, Chip.
And kind of going with that real quick is you can also get split up a little bit. Like it's okay to, and I did this with Lennon, our youngest, multiple times. Is mom took the older kids all, and they went and did one ride, and I took the younger two or younger one, and we did our own ride right at rope drop so they could hit the A ticket, and I went and did Navi's River Journey, or I did It's a Small World, and the kids loved it. But it's a
And
great
like
strategy with that.
I think I have some friends that are down there right now for the first time, and this really hits home the point that like Disney isn't all about checking off boxes, right? And so like for Chip and his family or mine and my family, like, yeah, that might be like we're trying to get as much done as possible in a morning. But we've been before. And like there's like a little bit of a challenge to that. If you're going for the first time, that it shouldn't be a race to get from one thing to another to another to another. So like I would encourage people, don't feel that pressure to jump from attraction to attraction to attraction and knock it all out, because you're going to go to Disney 5 times and you still won't have done everything. Right?
Yeah.
Like it's just there's just too much to do. And even after your like second or third trip, that's when you're like scratching the surface of some of the fun stuff that you can do and the strategies that you can employ and things like that. But my next biggest tip, and this one always gets overlooked, is to always mobile order your food, even the snacks. Unless you're going to a snack cart or something like that, mobile order is going to be your best friend. You don't want to be waiting 30 minutes in line for an ice cream when you can pop on the app at Sunshine Seasons and just order one and then go pick it up. You're going to see a bunch of people that are going to be waiting in those lines, and it's because they don't know any better. That's how you're going to know that you're more prepared than they are, right? And we harp on that a lot on this show, and I do with my clients. Like, make sure you're familiar with the My Disney Experience, app. Make sure you're familiar with how to mobile order, how to find different things, and you're going to make sure you have a much better trip that way. Chip, what's your next tip?
My next tip is enjoy your resort.
Yes,
And
love
you
it.
knew it
I
was
love it.
coming. You knew it was coming with me. And it's one of those that you're on vacation. At the end of the day, you are on vacation.
You're
It might
parenting
not,
in a different place.
and it might not feel like it, but relax. You can relax. You are allowed to relax at Disney. It's you can do it a lot. But take advantage of your pool. Take advantage of your resort, the resort activities. One of the things we did this past summer is we went and got a deck of cards from the community hall, and we played. I taught my kids how to play solitaire. So that's something like that, or rent a movie, or watch a movie together. Just
Get some
watch
board
them,
games.
get some board games, watch a movie at night out on, in every resort, I believe, is doing that now, where they're watching, you can watch a movie at night, but just enjoy the amenities that are provided without having to go into the park.
And I think that's a really good point. And that goes back to, spend some of your budget on your resort and spend some time there. Like you're spending that money for a reason. You don't have to be in the parks 24/7. And that jumps really good into as a good segue into my next tip, which would be leave the parks at lunchtime. Most people don't realize that from lunch to 2 p.m. is when the wait times at the theme parks peak. So if you can go and leave and go hang out at the pool, get some snacks in the room, maybe take a nap. People say that all the time, and like my kids aren't going to nap, but that doesn't mean you can't go back and have like quiet time at the room. That's just as much rest as anything else. Go back and play a board game and have some lunch, get some snacks, and catch up on things and just kind of relax for a little bit, and then hit the ground running at like 2, 3, 4 p.m. so that you can stay out later and have some energy for the kids, because doing it all day 7 a.m. to 10 p.m. is just like it's not realistic. And you also get the double benefit of avoiding that huge crowd period of when the lines are the longest.
Correct. They say don't take a nap, or people say, well, my kids aren't going to nap. Listen, I have a fourth grader and a third grader, and they both took naps about day 4.
I feel like that's hitting the lottery. Like if your kids actually sleep when you go back to the resort, you've hit the lottery. But like even just laying down and letting them watch
But
TV for a little bit is
it
helpful.
started as quiet time though, Matt. It wasn't like,
Right.
hey, you guys got to take a nap. We're like, hey, we're gonna let the younger two sleep. You guys just hang out on your iPad, watch TV, and they fell asleep. And it's like, oh, okay, well,
And then
enjoy it.
dad falls asleep.
I'm not a big napper, but I did fall asleep for 20 minutes here and there. So
I only nap if it's at the parks in like the Frozen sing along or whatever.
that's
Chip, what
true.
other tips would you have for people headed down to a big crowded?
So we talked about meals. We talked about rope dropping. We talked about taking a break or enjoying your resort. I think the other thing would be is enjoy a show at night and sleep in the next day. So whether that's Happily Ever After, whether that's Fantasmic, whether that's Symphony of Us, is that what it's called? Oh, look at that! There we go. I'm super proud I got that. I've seen it twice now. So enjoy that. Do that. Close the park out, and then sleep in the next morning.
Yeah, I love
It,
that. I love
it
that. Like,
that's up your alley. That's you.
yeah, because I'm not like I just feel like the less you rope drop, I don't have statistics to back this up, but maybe I should do like a survey of my clients. The less you rope drop, the more enjoyable the trip is. I really feel strongly about that. And I've got clients that are the opposite. I know, our buddy Steven just went down and I mean his family, they rope dropped like almost every day. They're a lot like you. They want to check the boxes, they want to hit the rides, they want to see how much they can do in a day. But for the most part, like I feel like families have a lot more fun if they can try and slow things down. I think that's a really good point, Chip. The other thing that we never want to talk about because we don't want to scare any parents, but making plans to locate your children and to kind of know what to do if somebody gets lost is really important. And again, I don't think people talk a lot about it because you don't want to think about the worst case scenario. But occasionally families get separated, and like you want to have either like some matching clothes or a place to meet up. You want to make sure that your kids know how to recognize cast members. If for some reason they can't find mom and dad, how do I recognize a cast member so that I can make sure that I can get help? And then also, we like to make sure all our kids are wearing like air tags or some sort of tracking band. And again, you don't ever expect that to happen, but it's important that you guys talk about it as a family and you have a plan for those things, especially when it's so crowded. Because it's only one person kind of looking down at their phone or looking down at something or looking off to see Daisy Duck where everybody else kept walking. And you've got like the Kevin McAllister situation, right? They look up and all the kid sees is a sea of people. And it's hard for them to recognize where mom and dad went. Mom and dad, even if they only walked for a minute before they realized it, that minute gets you, 100 people between you and your kid. So, like, again, it's the worst case scenario. It's not something that any parent ever wants to envision, but I think it's really important to plan for, especially when you're going down for spring break.
Oh, I've never even thought about that. That's so crazy. I've never thought about like that.
And like
That's a
Chip, I
good
think that we
idea.
don't, especially because our kids are a little younger. So it's like our kids don't stray far, but your oldest is at that age, man, where like, you can say, "Hey, why don't you run to the bathroom? We're gonna wait over here." And at Disney, kids aren't gonna get snatched or anything like that. Like that's not the concern. There, Disney has cameras literally everywhere. But it's an easy way to get separated. The more you can educate your kids, the more comfortable you're going to feel, when you're down there. So I think that that's really important. Chip, the next one I really want to talk about, and I feel like you just naturally do it, and maybe I do too, because we just know how to get different places, but is planning the transportation and like
Yeah.
how much more important that becomes when you're down there with large crowds. What do you tell people in terms of transportation at Disney when they're making reservations? Like, would you tell people to make less reservations at other resorts, or do you think that it's okay as long as they're planning their transportation out?
If they're planning their transportation out, I think it's okay. I think the one thing is that's going to struggle a little bit is larger groups, just because and I always say, hey, listen, don't be afraid to use Uber or Lyft, but there's ways to get there from the different resorts to different resorts. So I recommend you're okay planning in about an hour, but if it gets close, call an Uber. That'll probably save you. It's going to cost you a little bit, but there's your frustration. And I'll admit, we were that family. We were about 15, 20 minutes late to a reservation at Steakhouse 71, and I was calling, and I'm like, hey, listen, they're rerouting us. Like we can't get there. Like I'm freaking out. Like I'm gonna have to pay $100. All this. We show up, and like I was mad at my wife, and it was not a fun time to be me. But my wife went up and talked to him. They're like, oh no, you're fine. You're good. And it's like,
Yeah, and like I think I pulled up to the Riviera when you guys were using an Uber at one point.
oh yeah, that's when we were going
Yeah,
back to we were off property, yeah. But yeah,
yeah,
we
yeah,
we do
yeah, yeah.
use
And the Uber and Lyft are great. And like, but what people don't realize is like if normally you plan on buses come every 20 minutes and you're able to easily bounce between, resorts and all the different restaurants, there's more people using the bus system. So when you have more people using the bus system, sometimes they're going to take a little longer. The same goes for the monorail. Like you could get caught in a rush where there's a long line. Like you just need to plan things out and give yourself a little bit more time when it's more crowded like that. And the other thing is like if you make a dining reservation at Disney Springs, just navigating the walkways at Disney Springs takes a lot longer because it's just the whole area is just crowded. And you just have to give yourself a lot more time for all of those things. Chip, let's give people one more each before we start to wrap things up.
so mine actually was going towards Disney Springs. And I was gonna say take an evening or take an afternoon and go over to Disney Springs. Take a morning. Go over to Disney Springs and spend a few hours over there. It gives you still the Disney feel. You're going to get some different restaurants, some different quick service options, some snack options. I just think it's one of those things, one of those places that I feel incomplete if I don't go during our trip. And obviously, we're big Gideon's fans. We love the Gideon's cookies. We love the peanut butter cold brew. It's a point that I make to go get it. That's one of the biggest things I recommend.
The more I think about that, the more I wish Disney Springs opened earlier. Like it's frustrating that you can't go there before like 9 a.m. because it'd be nice to go and get a breakfast at 7:30 at
Yeah.
Disney Springs. I think there's a lot of really good options there that would be really enjoyable. And I think that's great advice. The last one that I'm going to give people is to make sure you order groceries and your snacks to your resort. People forget all the time that you can use Amazon, you can use Whole Foods delivery, Walmart, Instacart, Target, all of them. They can deliver their groceries directly to your resort hotel. The resort hotel will put them in the refrigerator until you arrive. If they're perishable, they'll make sure they're taken care of. They'll bring them down to your room for you. And then you've got like you can definitely do peanut butter and jelly, bring those into the parks. It saves you money, it saves you time, it saves you lines and waiting for the snack carts and all that kind of fun stuff. So I think making sure you order some granola bars and crackers and trail mix and drinks and all that fun stuff, I think is really important. It'll make your vacation a lot easier and less stressful for sure.
And going with that, man, we this past summer we ordered groceries. They delivered to our room, and we weren't there. So I said, "Hey, we're not there." And they're like, "Okay, we'll take it to the front desk." And I mean, the people that are delivering your groceries, this isn't their first rodeo. This is what they do.
Yeah. And
So
90% of the time, they won't even bring the grocer, whoever's delivering it will not bring it to your room. Like at most resorts. I think at Saratoga and some of the others, they might. But for the most part, they bring them to Bell Services. Bell Services puts them in the refrigerator and they sit there until you get there. So, like a lot of times, we'll order ours and they're delivered like 2 or 3 hours before our plane lands, just so that I can make sure that they're there before we arrive. So that basically, as soon as we arrive, if we want snacks and stuff, everything's already there. But also, I'm not having to wait to plan my day around when the grocery guy is going to get there, which I think is helpful. It's the same reason, like, I like to have the stroller delivered before we even arrive because then I don't have to think about it. If it's late, it's still there before I get there. And those are things that I do for my clients too. I'll order it an extra hour early. And when they get there, even if they were 15 or 20 minutes late with the stroller, it's still 45 minutes early to my client, which I think is really important. But that's gonna wrap it up. As always, we appreciate you guys listening. If you could like, rate, and review the podcast on any platform you listen to, we very much appreciate it. If you've got questions, hit us up on social media or send me an email, matt@adventuresofaDisneyDad.com. And as always, if you'd like me to help plan your next Walt Disney World, Universal, Disney Cruise Line vacation, I would love to do so. The link to get a quote is going to be in the show notes. Chip, we'll see you next week. We're gonna
yeah,
be
we'll
back
see
to
you.
100%. We're gonna
100%. Yeah.
and you know what? I think next week we need to jump into some of the Disney news stuff because this 2 hours waiting for a baby tiger is a little crazy, and we need to chat a little bit about it. So we'll jump into all that and more next week, and we'll see you guys in the parks.